Hello and welcome everyone to this lesson, which is about gerund and infinitive. And it's based on a very common question I get from many of you, and that is, how do we choose between gerund and infinitive? Are there any rules? My answer is that there are a few rules, guidelines, more like it, but you mainly need to rely on your ears to tell you what sounds right. Now, the good news is that if you make a mistake here, your message is still perfectly clear. So just be patient. You will gradually activate the correct form, right? But today, we're going to help you pick up some of the guidelines and hopefully start using them. But first, let's look at when we need to choose between gerund and infinitive. Sometimes we need to use a verb without conjugating it, that is, without putting it in a tense. In this case, unlike other languages, which offer only one form, usually English has three forms to choose from. And these three forms are infinitive with to do, infinitive without to, just do, and gerund, which is the noun form of a verb. Let's look at three examples. So for the verb need, if you have a second verb, you need to use infinitive with to. She needs to relax more. After modal verbs like should, we need to use the base verb, infinitive without to. They should hire more staff. And the example for the gerund is the verb enjoy. If you put a verb after the conjugated verb enjoy, it has to be in the ing doing form. He enjoys spending time in nature. The most common form, and the form most of us like to use, is to do, infinitive without to. And if in doubt, just go for that. Go for infinitive with to, because it's the most common one. But of course, sometimes the other two forms are necessary. So now we're going to look at some guidelines where you must not use to do and use the other forms. Starting with do, when we should use do. There are three categories here. First of all, after all modal verbs. That's easy to remember, a very easy rule to remember. After a modal verb, just use do, the base verb, no to. The modal verbs, you know, are can, could, may, might, must, should, will, shall, and would. So I must go now. Sometimes I hear some students say, I must to go now, to be avoided. I must go now. The second category here is after these common verbs and expressions. The list is not exhaustive, but these are the common ones that you need to remember. Let, make, would rather, had better, and why not? With the question, why not go, not why not going, which is the common mistake. For example, with the verb make, the presenter made us all stand up. No to, no ing. And the third category here, the final one, is after verbs and expressions that end in to, obviously. We have four of these: ought to, which is a modal verb, but happens to have the word to as part of it. Have to, which means obligation. Used to, habit in the past. And going to, a future form. Obviously, that's the easiest one to remember. You don't want to use anything other than do, the base verb here. For example, you ought to be more cautious. So that's for the base verb, when you should use do, three categories, quite straightforward, really. Now, let's look at doing. The first one I want to mention to you is if you use a verb as the subject of another verb, you must make sure you use the gerund form, the doing form, not the infinitive. A common mistake I hear is, for example, to walk in nature is healthy. Make sure you use the gerund when it's the subject of a verb, because really we want to use the noun form of the verb here as a subject. But be careful that if you say, if you construct your sentence the other way, like saying it is healthy, then you keep the infinitive with to. It is healthy to walk in nature. So that's the first category with doing. The second one, very clear rule in English, after a preposition. So for example, I apologize for being late. I have 3 notes here about this particular category. Remember that to itself can also be a preposition. It confuses things, makes things complicated. But to is also a preposition, like for, like in. A very clear example is he is used to. So this is the expression to be used to, which means to be accustomed to. As a preposition here, the next verb has to be in the gerund form. So he's used to, or he's accustomed to, working in a noisy office. Note 2. Obviously, a phrasal verb always ends in a preposition. So if you have a second verb after a conjugated phrasal verb, it's usually also with ing. For example, I carried on reading. And the final note, because it's a common mistake I thought I'd point it out here, make sure you don't answer a why question with for doing. For example, if we say, why are you studying English? Don't say, for improving my career prospects. It is to improve my career prospects. You have to use the infinitive form of the verb when you give the reason for doing something, the goal, the objective. Right, one more, I think. Yeah, no, 2 more. The third category of obviously is after these common verbs and expressions. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but the most common ones that you're likely to use yourself and the ones that I hear the mistakes with. So again, here you will have to review them and then gradually rely on your memory to remember. The ones I have chosen for you to actively work on are risk, avoid, recommend, suggest, stop, finish, enjoy, mind, consider, quit, keep, and involve. And then the phrases can't stand, can't help, have difficulty or problems, and spend or waste time. These are common verbs and expressions you use, so you could try and remember these particularly, not the whole list, because the list can be quite long if you want to memorize all of them. For example, then he risks losing his place in the finals. Right, and one little one where again I sometimes hear mistakes being made is if you use go with an activity, you should use the gerund, not the infinitive. So I could have gone jogging yesterday, not I could have gone, excuse me, to jog yesterday. Right, what else have I got to say? Yes, so finally, of course, English being English, having gone through all the rules, there are also a few verbs, not many, that you can use either with to do or doing. And I've got 2 categories here for you. One is when you use to do or doing and you don't change the meaning at all. So the exact same meaning. And there are 3 verbs here: start, begin, and continue. So it doesn't make any difference whether you say we started to climb the hill or we started climbing the hill. Same meaning, both are correct, both are equally common to use. The next group in this category are like, hate, and prefer. So usually, especially in British English, we use the ing form, doing, the gerund with these verbs. So I like, hate, prefer swimming. But you may also hear to swim without changing the meaning at all. That's probably more common in American English. But an important note here is that if you add would to these 3 verbs, you change the idea from a general like, dislike, or preference to a dislike or a like or a preference that you are experiencing at the moment. And in that case, you can only use to do. So don't say, I would hate interrupting you, but I would hate to interrupt you. And so that's a specific case here. And now the other category, when we can use both to do or doing, but where here the meaning changes. There are two verbs I'd like to point out to you here. The first one is remember. Remember has two meanings. The first meaning is not to forget, is the opposite of forget. But it has a second meaning, which is recall. So if it's not to forget, then it's with infinitive with to. I must remember to put my glasses in my bag. I must not forget. But when it's recall, it's I remember putting my glasses in my bag last night, but they're not here now. So here you recall doing something in the past. So the form changes depending on which meaning you have. And the final verb, or the second verb in this category where the meaning changes, is regret. Regret, you can use regret to express that you are sorry for the action you are going to take, or sorry for an action that you have already taken. For the first case, it's with the infinitive with to. I regret to tell you this, but it's now a regret you have for the action you're going to take. But if it's an action you took in the past, then it changes to ing. So it's I regret telling her that joke. So that's all for the rules and the different categories. So obviously this needs a lot of revision, and then gradually through revision, through writing your own examples and through exposure to many examples, they will become reflexive, automatic. Be patient, give yourself time. One last thing I'd like to mention is that this form doing is not just a gerund form. You also see the form doing in continuous tenses or as an adjective. It's not the same thing. Doing is not called a gerund when it's in a tense or in an adjective. It's called the present participle. So if you look at this sentence, we had it before, walking in nature. Walking is the gerund here because it's the noun, it's the subject of the verb. Is becoming popular. Becoming is not the gerund. It's the present continuous tense, and the becoming part of it is called present participle. It's the same if you use an adjective. For example, walking in nature is energizing. Walking is the gerund form, but energizing is present participle, which is being used here as a participle adjective. So I thought, because that question comes up as well, so I hope that clarifies that doing has two different, falls into two different categories, the gerund or the present participle. All right, that brings me to the end of this session, this lesson. I hope it's been helpful. As I said, you do need to revise it a few times, make some notes for yourself, and just don't worry about making mistakes with gerund and infinitive for the moment. They will become active in your spoken English and written English. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. For more on this topic, click here. Remember to also check out my complete online course, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and happy studies!